Hi there, I'm Colin and this is the Action Figure Resource video channel, the place for all your action figure news, reviews, tutorials and guides. Today I'm taking an in-depth look at the Kenner Batman The Dark Knight series of action figures released in 1990. Don't forget to subscribe below, click on the bell icon to be informed of all my future videos and smash that like button. Okay, let's get on with today's video.
ActionFigureResource.com. Yesterday's toys, today's treasures.
Kenner released Batman The Dark Knight series of action figures in 1990 when the license moved from Toy Biz. Kenner released two waves of this line of figures, the first wave in 1990 followed by a smaller wave in 1991. The first wave included 6 variants of Batman and 1 Joker figure, and Series 2 in 1991 featured 2 more Batman variants and 1 Joker figure. Unlike the upbeat and cartoony style look of the earlier Toy Biz figures, these were more realistic and detailed in design. The biggest problem with the Kenner line was its over-dependence on Batman variants. Out of the 20 figures or so released by Kenner, only 2 non-Batman figures were released, and both of these were of the Joker. All the Batman figures in both these waves, except 2, used a retooled and repainted Batman sculpt from the Kenner Superpowers line released in 1984. Kenner also released a series of vehicles to go with the first wave of figures. Like the Batman figure, these vehicles were retooled versions from previous Kenner toy lines such as RoboCop, Ultra Police and Silverhawk. Kenner also released a subset of deluxe figures, which were just retooled and repainted versions of previously released figures with bigger and better accessories. The only difference between the Dark Knight Batman sculpts and the Superpowers Batman was the head sculpt, a sculpted belt on the Dark Knight Batman and no knee articulation, which the Superpowers figure had. All the Dark Knight figures had Kenner's standard hip and arm joints and a swivel head joint. His left hand on most of these was sculpted with a clenched fist, whereas his right hand was sculpted open in order that he could hold and use his many accessories. Most of these variant Batman figures also came with a removable cloth cape that used a C-clip to clip on around his neck. Unfortunately, the cloth that his cape was made from was not very strong and over time was easily torn, ripped and lost. One of the main characteristics of this line, which significantly impacted its success, was its flexible and collector-friendly design and packaging. Kenner's Batman The Dark Knight line was also the first DC line to feature Kenner's standard 5 points of articulation and the concept of variant figures. Despite the many variations of Batman, and unlike the previous Toy Biz line, the complete Kenner line remains popular and in demand even today. Each of the figures in this line came on a standard backing card that featured the figure enclosed in its bubble on the bottom half of the card, and the top hand of the card with a Michael Keaton profile on the left hand side and a photograph of the actual figure and the title on the right hand side. The reverse side of the card featured instructions and diagram of the figure and its action features on the top half, and the bottom half featured other figures and the vehicles from the line. Kenner hyped up these figures and vehicles in their 1990 toy guide, but many were not realised or released until much later, if at all. For example, the Joker Mobile and the Batcave Command Center. Unlike many of today's toys, which seem to be made more for the collector, these toys in the 70s, 80s and 90s were made for kids and to be played with. As a result, their action features and accessories played a very important part in any of the toy lines released. Wave 1 of Kenner's Batman The Dark Knight featured Crime Attack Batman, Tech Shield Batman, Wall Scaler Batman, Sky Escape Joker, Iron Winch Batman, Shadow Wing Batman, and Bruce Wayne. The first figure we're going to look at today is the Crime Attack Batman from Wave 1, released in 1990. Crime Attack Batman was probably the most popular of the Batman figures in this line. He had a classic, solid black paint scheme with a gold belt and a comic book style Batman logo, rather than the logo from the movie, on his chest, and a removable black cape with a C-clip that fitted around his neck to attach it. The Michael Keaton head sculpt was particularly good on this figure, and remarkably close in likeness, especially considering the fact that this was before real scan technology was used and everything was hand sculpted. The body and hand sculpts were also very well made and detailed. He came with two accessories, a capture claw and a Batmarang with a working spring-loaded launcher. The launcher was gold in colour, as was Batman's belt. The armour he was sculpted wearing was also a slightly different design to the one featured in the movie. His head had swivel articulation and could turn a full 360 degrees, and his arms could also be fully rotated round. His legs had limited articulation with only a backwards and forwards movement. With his classic look and solid black paintwork, this figure was the closest in look to the Michael Keaton figure in the movie. Mint on the card, this figure sells on the secondary market for between $27 to $64, with an average figure of about $40. Loose, he sells for $9.50 to $16.99, with an average price of $10.99. The next figure we're taking a look at is the Tech Shield Batman. This was the only Dark Knight Batman that was not reissued in the Batman Returns line. This figure featured Batman wearing a gold Tech Shield armor suit, a black belt, gauntlets and cowl, and a gold bat emblem on his chest. This was another retooled and repainted solid gold Superpowers Batman, so the sculpting for this figure was the same as the others. The gold and black colours on this figure actually looked really good together, although this costume was never featured in the movie or comic book. His Tech Shield Flight Pack accessory was a reissue from Condor in the Silver Hawks line. There were two variations of the Tech Pack, one with gold-tipped wings and turbine, and one with grey-tipped wings and turbine. The rarer of the two is the grey-tipped pack. However, the gold pack is the one that was most popular and looked better. The Tech Shield pack could be attached to Batman's back. There was a lever at the bottom of the Tech Shield pack that, when pulled down, caused the wings to shoot out from the pack. Mint on the card, this figure sells for between $9.99 and $40, with an average value of $19.99. Loose he sells for between $2.99 and $14.99, with an average value of $9.99. The next figure we're looking at is Wall Scaler Batman. The colours used on the Wall Scaler Batman were unrelated to anything in the comic book or the movie, with a sky blue body and dark blue boots, gloves, trunks, cowl and a removable cape, giving him a very classic 60s look. The paintwork was well applied with little overlap or bleeding. The figure came with a Wall Scaler backpack that consisted of a grappling hook attached to the pack by a retractable rope that went through the pack. This grappling hook could latch onto any tall buildings or obstacles that Batman needed to scale, and when his rope was pulled tight, he would slide up to the top. Mint on the card, this figure sells for between $19.89 and $34.99, with an average value of $29.99. Loose, he sells from $4. Next up, we have the Iron Winch Batman. The Iron Winch Batman had a grey suit similar in style to the Tech Shield Batman, but the grey on this figure was a lot lighter, and the blue used on his cape, gauntlets, gown and gloves were also slightly lighter than the blue on the Tech Shield Batman. He also had a gold belt and logo, which was fairly standard for this line. For accessories, he had an iron winch and a Batmarang from the movies. The Batmarang was attached to the winch with some rope so that it could be used for scaling walls and buildings or capturing villains. However, due to fears of it being a choking hazard, the rope on the iron winch was very short, which limited its playability. The winch had a button on the side which, when pressed, would retract the rope and the winch, and there was a clip on its back which could be used to clip the pack onto Batman's back. However, when clipped on, it was quite loose and not a very good fit. A plus side of this figure was that even with his pack attached to his back, Batman could stand unaided. Mint on the card, this figure sells for between $19.89 and $34.99 and an average value of $29.99. Loose, he sells from $4 to $11.70 with an average value of around the $7 mark. The next figure is Shadow Wing Batman. This figure had a solid black paint job and a gold belt with a Batman logo on his chest similar to that of the Crime Attack Batman, except the paintwork was slightly darker and the armour shinier. He also came with a set of functional back cuffs for capturing the criminals. The Shadow Wing Batman was almost exactly the same as the Crime Attack Batman, except for his action feature, which was activated by squeezing his knees together, which caused his arms to shoot up, fanning out his cape. This was reminiscent to a scene from the movie. Because of this action feature, his arms were sculpted differently to the other variants, so that they could lift up and down as well as sideways. For a figure that was hand sculpted in the 80s, this is an excellent sculpting with plenty of detail and an exceptionally good likeness of Michael Keaton. This figure, unlike most of the other variants in this line, had new arm, chest and head sculpts, as well as a different style of coat. All in all, this was a very great classic looking Batman and one of my favourites from this line. Mint on the card, this figure sells from $24.99 to $54.99 with an average selling price of $29.99. Loose, he sells for between $9.99 and $18 with an average price of $11.50. Next is the Bruce Wayne figure. This was the last of the Batman variants in this line and was vastly different from the others, being based on Bruce Wayne rather than the superpowers Batman figure, and the only one that used a completely different body and head sculpt that was incredibly detailed and had a great likeness of Keaton. The base figure was a solid black sculpt with a turtleneck sweater. This was so that when his backsuit was attached, the flesh on his neck was not visible. For accessories, this figure came with a Batman outfit, consisting of his boots, gauntlets, and chest plate. The chest plate had a gold belt and Batman logo painted onto it. His cape and cowl were one piece, so that he could quickly change into his Batman disguise whenever he needed to. His right gauntlet included a sculpted Batmarang in his hand, which was a nice added touch. His cowl also came with some eye slits cut into it, and when the cowl and cape were slid over his face, the eye slits actually matched up to Batman's eyes, enabling him to see through. The armour was also nicely sculpted and very detailed, but when fitted onto Bruce Wayne, the shoulders were a bit oversized and looked out of place. Overall, this was an excellent figure, especially with his ability to change quickly between the two characters. These were easy to snap on or off the figure, and unlike the armour on the Toy Biz Iron Man line, stayed on very well. The only problem was the gauntlets, which were very tight fit on his hands and extremely hard to remove once they had been put on. Another big plus for this figure was even with his armour and suit fitted on, he still had his full articulation. Mint on the card, this figure sells for between $19.33 and $49.95, with an average value of $30 to $35. Loose, he sells for between $1.99 and $18, with an average value of $12 to $15. The last figure in this line we're looking at is the Sky Escape Joker. This figure, as with the Batman variant, was a retooled and repainted version of Kenner's 1984 Superpowers Joker figure, except this version had no knee articulation, which the Superpowers figure had. He also had a different head sculpt to the Superpowers version. The biggest problem with this figure was that his clothes were very different in colour and style to those that were featured in the movie, comic book or TV series. Here he has pink trousers, a burgundy jacket and a blue waistcoat and gloves. Why they chose these colours is a complete mystery, but obviously somebody on Kenner's board thought that these would suit him. All that said, this figure was so much better on so many different levels to the Toy Biz figure. The overall sculpting and detail were very good, and the head sculpt was excellent, with a very good likeness of Jack Nicholson as the Joker. That said, his hair was probably a bit too luminescent and could have been a little darker. For an accessory, it came with his long-barreled pistol. He also had a whirling copter pack that could be attached to his back for a quick flying escape over Gotham's busy streets. He also had the added feature that when his head was dipped into water, his makeup would disappear to reveal his true face. However, over time and with age, this feature would become obsolete and would stop working. If you are thinking of buying one of these Joker figures loose, be careful and check the figure closely, because often kids cut off his coattails in order to be able to put him in a sitting position for the vehicles. Also, often the copter pack is missing, or parts are missing, or the pistol. So when purchasing, make sure you get all the complete accessories and that his coattails are intact before buying. Mint on the card, this figure sells for between $30 and $119, with an average price of $50. Loose, he sells for between $3.95 and $12.99, depending on whether he has his copter pack and pistol or not. That's all for the first wave of Kenner's Batman The Dark Knight line. Next we're going to be looking at Wave 2 that was released in 1991. This included Power Wing Batman, Thunder Whip Batman and Knockout Joker. I will also be taking a look at the Deluxe Crime Master edition. These figures were released in 1991 and included Batman with Claw Climber, Batman with Blast Shield and Batman with Night Glider. I will also be taking an in-depth look at the vehicles that were released with this line in 1990. The vehicles included the Batcycle, Joker Cycle, Batjet, Batcopter, Turbojet, Batwing, Batmobile and Batman Bowler Bullet and Batman Strike Wing. Please note that all the prices mentioned in this video are for information only and are not an offer or solicitation to buy any. When researching these prices, I check both online and offline auction houses as well as retail sites in order to find the most accurate and up-to-date prices at the time of recording. Also bear in mind that these prices can fluctuate tremendously based on their condition, whether they are mint and whether they are complete with their accessories and loose or on the card. Don't forget to subscribe below. Click on the bell icon to be informed of my future videos and smash that like button.
ActionFigureResource.com. Yesterday's toys, today's treasures.